Normally, I would stand up and do the opening remarks, but I took a peep at the computer there. The team has put the speaker's PowerPoint slides and his notes. I better not stand down there. You didn't go haywire, it's my fault, no? So allow me to speak to you from where I'm seated now, but I just want to be quite brief because I think many of the elements that our desk in charge want me to make a reference to in my introductory remarks will be covered by our esteemed speaker, Dr. Khor. So I think I will just briefly say something to set the context for today's gathering here. This particular topic that all of you have signed up to listen to Dr. Khor Hoe is a very important and at the same time very present kind of issue. Every day you read the newspaper or you hear the news on TV or radio, these are all the elements that will come out. So I hope this afternoon we will have a chance to put all our general knowledge and our doubts and questions in our head to this format that Dr. Khor is going to present to us in the context of all the things that we read about every day now, about what you call AI, green tech, and great power rivalry. These are new things. I don't know how to manage myself about AI and the green tech. Maybe I know a bit about great power rivalry, but I think we will enjoy some additional knowledge listening to Dr. Khor this afternoon. The main thing I want to say is that the world order, or whatever the world is as we know it, is no longer there in all its wholeness, wholesome interpretation you have in your head to understand what's going on in the world, how problems will be resolved, how do we deal with the new issues, with the presence of the old issues. All these will have to change because we have new players and new ideas coming from these new players, politicians, no doubt, which really cannot explain some of the things that we thought should be dealt with. In other words, we cannot read the mind of the leaders handling all these policies that affect our digital world, that affect our positioning vis-a-vis power politics, or how to manage powerful men like the President of the United States of America. So hopefully Dr. Khor will give us some of his formula in appreciating and understanding the challenges we are facing. My research team has given me a lot of things to talk about, but if I do this, I will give me a lecture. I think we have Dr. Khor here to give a lecture, but I will just close by saying that, yes, at the end of the day, after the lecture from Dr. Khor, we might feel a bit uncertain how to deal with all these new issues which USA and other developed countries are throwing onto the table. But at the same time, don't be too depressed, because as my late father used to say, every generation have your own issues, own challenges. And every time, if you put your head together, you can find a way to navigate some of these problems. Yeah. But the message that I want to put with all of you is that we need to take into account we are in a very technologically driven world today, information driven, new things keep on coming out. AI now. Last night I spent some time watching the television program on how to have a date with an AI girl. I tell you, it's quite amazing. And unfortunately, the only complaint I have about the program is that all the subjects happen to be old men. As though the old men are the problem, are the only guy with the problem of having to find a date when they grow old or when their spouse has passed away before them. But really, if you look at all this, you just wonder how life will be in another 2 or 3 years when dating is done by apps, and whatever you want to do or whatever you want to study come through AI. But that is something at a personal level. And today, Dr. Khor is going to position some of these new things and challenges in the context of how we, as a country, as a member of an international community, handle all the disruptions and people who don't play by the rules and have other ways of getting result. If you don't comply, you'll be fired, as they say. Maybe there is a way out for us, but let us now listen to what Dr. Khor had to say, and after that we will get your comments and your questions. So please give your attention to our speaker this afternoon. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, King Yong. Ambassador Ong. He's been my friend for a long time, so I could call him by first name. But anyway, thank you for inviting me to give this distinguished lecture. So before I begin my prepared remarks, I must acknowledge what happened just last Friday. The US Supreme Court struck down President Trump's tariff enacted under IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And this is extraordinary, right? The courts have ruled that Trump exceeded his authority. Trump has responded by announcing a new global tariff of 15% for 150 days, essentially buying time while he figures out his next move. And here's the remarkable part. Importers and retailers are now expecting refunds of $170 billion. Billion, yeah. A lot of money. I mean, he's been boasting about how many billions he's been collecting, but a lot of these are going to have to be refunded, I think. I mention this because it perfectly validates the thesis of this lecture. This lecture grew out of a commentary that I wrote for the Business Times in early Jan. I wrote it because I was troubled by a question. Why were we, economists, analysts, forecasters, so spectacularly wrong about 2025? We have predicted a slowdown in the ASEAN region, a recession, or at least a sharp downturn in the US economy, and a spike up in inflation. We also expected a market crash. None of this happened. So today, I want to share with you what I think we missed, and more importantly, what it means for ASEAN's strategic choices going forward. So let me start by showing you just how wrong we were. So a year ago, Trump had just taken office, and he immediately announced a massive tariff increase, 25% on Mexico and Canada, his two closest neighbors. Then on April 2nd, he announced reciprocal tariff of 20 to 50% on about 90 countries. In our region, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar were hit with 40 to 50% tariff. Other ASEAN countries faced 30 to 40% tariff. We couldn't believe our eyes. We were shell-shocked. We were reminded of Smoot-Hawley, the tariff act that triggered the Great Depression in the 1930s. At EMRO, we ran our models, GDP loss of 0.5 to 1 percentage points for the region. Our view has been at that time that the region, the ASEAN plus 3 region was relatively robust and has a lot of policy space to offset some of this or mitigate some of the impact of the tariff. So we had projected a decline of 0.5 to 1 percentage point of GDP for growth. The IMF forecast a sharp decline in US growth to 0.5% for 2025. And many analysts predicted a US recession and a spike in inflation. Market crashed by about 15-20% within a few days of the announcement. But look at where we stand today. Right? And ASEAN grew by a robust 4.8%, so it's even higher than the 4.6, which is, because the numbers keep changing, higher than the pre-tariff forecast. China's economy grew at 5%. The US economy expanded by 2% or more, no recession, and inflation remained relatively stable, no spike. Stock markets, all-time highs, right? So here's the puzzle. We weren't just a little bit off. We were completely wrong. The question before us isn't just, why were we so wrong in our forecast? But what did we miss? What happened? Turns out we were staring at the loud disruption, Trump's tariff, while missing the quiet structural forces which were actually driving the global economy. And that's AI investment and China's green revolution. To understand what happened, we need to categorize the shocks. 2025 was a natural experiment, the three major forces acting simultaneously. The first shock over here is the Trump's tariff war. We classify this now as a noise or non-systemic shock. Why? Because it's reversible, it's politically constrained, and ultimately gameable by the markets. And as the Supreme Court just confirmed this week, it was illegal from the start. The court have now struck it down. The second shock, AI revolution, this was signal. It's quiet but systemic, fundamentally restructuring production and transforming the global economy. The third shock, China's green dominance, also a signal, strategic and structural, creating entirely new global value chains across countries that no tariff can block because of the climate change agenda. So my core thesis, the market proved that it is bigger than Trump, but no one is bigger than technology. We survived the political noise, and the courts have now corrected it. But we now must adapt to the technological signals. So the market is bigger than Trump, and now so is the Supreme Court. This week's ruling isn't just a legal technicality. It's confirmation that American institutions still work. The checks and balances are still in place. Now, that's a big relief for many of us because we are beginning to doubt if there were any checks and balances at all in the US. Trump seemed to be getting his way on almost everything. The market sensed this, in that is, the tariffs were illegal. They bet, correctly, that Trump's tariff couldn't survive legal scrutiny, which is why they did not pass through the $170 billion of tariff which they paid on imports to the consumers. They were expecting to get a refund for this tariff from the government. And they were right. The Supreme Court decision vindicated the market. But no one is bigger than technology. This is my argument today. Trump's tariff tracks were noise. Markets gamed him, hashed him, waited him out, and now the courts have struck him down. But AI and green tech are structural transformational forces, reshaping production, creating new competitive advantages, defining winners and losers for decades to come. The question for ASEAN isn't whether to adapt. We have no choice, but we have to. The question is how. And that's what this lecture is about. So Trump as non-systemic disruption. Why did markets shrug off what looked like an economic apocalypse? And why did the Supreme Court ultimately agree with the markets? Let me show you the pattern that Wall Street identified long before the courts ruled. Let me get some more. Don't mind. No, I get one. I got it. Sorry, I drink a lot of water. So why did the market start off what looked like a trade apocalypse? Because they identified the taco pattern. As Robert Armstrong of the Financial Times put it, Trump always chickens out, right? So this chart shows the S&P movement in 2025. April 2nd, here, Trump announced a tariff increase and the market tanked. A week later, April 9, April 9, Trump panicked and pulled back. He reduced the tariff to 10% and announced a 90-day pause for negotiation of the new reciprocal rates. The market rallied. And then July 2nd, the pause expired. Negotiated rates settled at 19 to 20%, much lower than the initially announced rate. And markets continued to climb. So this became a trading strategy. The Wall Street, buy the panic, sell the recovery. For Main Street, front load exports during the pause at the lower baseline tariff rate of 10% to avoid the higher tariff after the pause. Importers build up inventories during the pause, draw them down when the tariff kicks in, the higher tariff kicks in at a higher rate. And now this week, the Supreme Court has validated exactly what the market sensed all along. The EPA tariff have been struck down as unconstitutional. Trump has announced a replacement, the 15% global tariff for 150 days, essentially a placeholder while his lawyers figure out what he can legally do. The markets were right. They bet that Trump's tariff couldn't survive politically, economically, or legally, and they won that bet. This is the ultimate proof that Trump was not non-systemic. The system, including the courts, ultimately corrected that. As I mentioned, exporters gamed the system by front-loading their exports. The 90-day pause created a predictable window. ASEAN exporters, Japan, Korea, massively ramp up shipments. Look at these numbers here. Year-on-year export growth to the US. Indonesia, the red bar, up 33%. Vietnam, 28%. Thailand, 25%. These are massive surge. The mechanism was simple. Step 1, ship goods during the pause at the lower tariff rates. Step 2, build up inventories in US warehouses. Step 3, when higher tariffs kick in, draw down the inventory. The result, price increases were dampened and consumer demand held up. And now with the Supreme Court ruling, those importers who did pay the EPA tariff, they are demanding the $170 billion back. The firms that front-loaded won twice. They avoided the higher tariff, and those that paid the baseline tariff are now getting refunds. Front-loading alone added an estimated 0.3 to 0.4 percentage points to growth, which was why the growth held up so well. This diagram sums up the three mechanisms that neutralized Trump's tariff. First, front-loading. Exporters took advantage of the pause to ramp up shipments. They added 0.3 to 0.4 percentage points to growth. Second, inventory build-up. Importers build up inventories and stockpile goods at the lower tariff. This created 2 or 3 quarters of cushions. They drew down the inventories after the pause to avoid the higher tariff, which dampened price increases. The third, tariff absorption. Importers and retailers absorb the tariff costs rather than passing them through to the consumers. Why? Because of uncertainty over the permanence or legality of the tariff. And the result, inflation stayed subdued and consumer demand held up. And here's a key insight from this week. That uncertainty over the permanence, it was justified. The Supreme Court just ruled the tariff illegal. The firms that absorbed the tariff costs, rather than passing them through, they were betting on exactly this outcome, and they won. Now they get $170 billion back in refunds from the government. But because the absorption prevented higher inflation in the economy, the Fed could ease policy instead of tighten. And that's why the US avoided a recession. This mechanism explains why growth outcomes exceeded forecasts. But Trump wasn't just gamed by the markets. He was also constrained by politics. There were 4 pressure points. 1, markets tanking. Trump watches the market obsessively. As you know, he was very proud of the bull market in his last night's speech to the State of the Union speech. A 15% crash hurt him personally and politically. 2, the farmers went bust. China retaliated by shifting imports of soybeans and other agricultural products to Brazil and Argentina. American farmers were devastated and many went bust. 3rd, retailers warning. Walmart, Target, and other big retailers warned of massive price increases from the higher tariff. They kept saying that they cannot continue to absorb the cost of the higher tariff and will have to pass them through in higher prices. And 4th, the MAGA base. Trump got getting nervous. The MAGA base was frustrated with the cost of living, which remained high, and becoming their top concern. Affordability was becoming a big issue. Moreover, the electoral calendar was ticking. 2026 November election is looming. The Republican majorities in Congress are thin and at risk. Trump needed economic wins, not pain. The point is, political survival beat ideological purity. He pulled back when approval ratings dropped, and his power is at risk. And now we can add a 5th constraint, the Supreme Court. The courts have ruled the EPA doesn't give the president unlimited tariff authority. As I mentioned earlier, Trump's 15% replacement for the illegal EPA tariff for 150 days is essentially a temporary holding position. The American system of checks and balances seems to have worked, at least in this particular case. And also remember, Trump cannot run again due to term limits. Next administration can undo everything he did, just as he did with the Biden administration policies. Unlike Trump 1.0, which targeted mainly China, Trump 2.0 is America first. Everyone is a target. Trump declared tariff war on China, EU, Canada, Mexico, Japan, Korea, ASEAN. No allies in this trade war. Everyone is an enemy. This is in sharp contrast with the Biden administration, which tried to build coalitions against China. But the rest of the world responded in the opposite way. Most countries still believe in the rules-based multilateral trading system. They doubled down on WTO, they accelerated negotiation of regional agreements and FTAs. The EU-India FTA was reached just recently after years of deadlock. Countries also adopted a China Plus One strategy, diversifying trade through Vietnam, Thailand, and Mexico. Also, US trade of global trade has shrunk from about 22% 2 decades ago to 13% today. The US is no longer the trading hegemon that it was in the past. China is now the biggest trading nation in the world. So even without the US, the rest of the world can continue to push ahead with the rule-based trading system. As we argued, Trump's tariff war was disruptive, but it was noise. Noise that can be costly, but does not fundamentally change the system. Now, let's turn to the first signal, AI. This is where it gets truly serious and consequential for ASEAN. Because the question is not whether AI will transform our economies. It will. The question is, how do we position ourselves to thrive in this rapidly changing AI world rather than be left behind? And I want to make the argument, ASEAN doesn't need to compete with the US and China on frontier AI. We need a smarter strategy. We should continue to leverage on the global supply chains and compete where we have comparative advantage. While we were watching and agonizing over tariffs that ultimately got struck down, the real growth engine was humming in the background. Harvard economist Jason Furman provided the revelation of the year. Investment in information processing was only 4% of US GDP, yet it contributed 92% of GDP growth in the first half of 2025. Without this investment, growth would have been only 1% instead of the 2% in the first half of the year. So you can see, but with the AI investment, it was 2%. So as one blogger put it, our economy is just 3 AI data centers in a trench coat. The numbers were staggering. Tech giants invested $100 billion in AI and data centers in a single quarter. The Magnificent Seven spent over $400 billion on CapEx last year. Data center investment surpassed consumer spending as GDP growth driver for the first time in US economic history. Think about this. Trump's tariff, gained by the markets and businesses and struck down by the Supreme Court, and now $170 billion in refunds due to the importers and retailers. AI investment, $100 billion in the single quarter, $400 billion for the whole year, and estimated to reach $600 billion this year, 2026, and for the next several years. So total spending of $3 trillion over the next 5 years. That's the difference between noise and signal. So why is AI so systemic? Because it is a general purpose technology, GPT. And GPT has 4 characteristics. 1, is pervasive. It affects all sectors of the economy. 2, it improves over time. It gets cheaper, better, and faster, exponentially. 3, it spawns innovations. It creates complementary technologies, and the number of AI apps have exploded, as you know. And 4, it reshapes production. It changes how things are made and produced. AI meets all 4 criteria. Look at the historical pattern of GPTs. Steam engine. It took 50 years to spread and transform the global economy. Electricity, 40 years. Computing, 30 years. Internet, 20 years. AI, maybe 10 years. Each GPT is faster than the last. And we don't have 40 years to adapt like our grandparents had with electricity. We may have 10. The most important feature of AI, it affects cognitive labor. It can perform mental work many times faster than human brains. The technology is disruptive for cognitive services. For instance, coding. Indian programmers must now compete with Claude GPT-4. Legal analysis. Philippine law grads must compete with Harvey AI. Medical diagnosis. Radiologists must now compete with AI readers. Translation. Human translators must compete with DeepL. And in design, graphic designers must compete with Midjourney. But some services remain protected. The fiscal services, shipping, airlines, childcare, elderly care, nursing, tourism, and sports. The important point here is that not all services are disrupted for now, but enough cognitive services will be disrupted to reshape production, business models, and trade. This affects ASEAN service export strategies. BPO, business process outsourcing, especially call center, radiology analysis, paralegal work, these are vulnerable to disruption. We need to think carefully about where we compete. We need to plan for the disruption and identify new activities and industries that will not be affected. AI has become a security issue for the US. The US goal to slow China's AI development by denying China of advanced chips. But here's the paradox. Sanctions accelerated China's development by forcing them to be self-sufficient. So what has been China's response? They invested $100 billion in semiconductor industry to become more self-sufficient. Huawei has managed to develop advanced chips, 7 nanometer, not the 3 or 2 nanometer, despite the sanctions. Chinese AI models, DeepSeek, Baidu, Alibaba, they are now as competitive as the US model. The architecture are more efficient, and they use less computational power and are much cheaper. The open source AIs are free and widely adopted in the global south. But history should have warned the US. The Soviet space program let the US compete and put a man on the moon. So pressure creates innovation, and necessity is the mother of invention. What was supposed to be a 5 to 10 year technological lag between the US and China may become a 3 to 5 year leapfrog. So now we have a permanent bifurcation in the AI space, US tech sphere and China tech sphere. And ASEAN must navigate both. We cannot choose side, we must straddle, and we have to choose the best in each sphere. So what is ASEAN's move? We often fall into the trap of thinking that we need to catch up and build ASEAN's ChatGPT or Gen AI model. That would be a mistake and a costly one. Competing on Gen AI, building foundational models, is an estimated $100 billion game over 15 to 20 years. It requires advanced chips that are very costly and closely guarded. It requires a lot of brain power. It means competing head-to-head with the US and Chinese giants. ASEAN is unlikely to win there. Our opportunity is in applications. This is a $5 to $10 billion game over 3 to 5 years. We don't need to build the foundation models. We need to build on top of them. We don't need to invent the engine, we build a car. We know this strategy works because we have done it before. Take Grab. Grab didn't invent GPS, they didn't launch satellites or build mapping technology. They took the existing US technology, Google Maps, and applied it to local context. What did they do? They allowed cash payments for the unbanked population. They used motorbikes to beat the Asia's traffic jam. They enabled street food delivery. They built multi-service super apps. And the result, they outcompeted Uber. They built a $40 billion company. So Uber probably had better technology, but Grab had better local knowledge and built better applications. Another example, Singapore Airlines. It doesn't manufacture airplanes. It buys them from Boeing or Airbus. But it is a world-class airline because it excels at service application, right? And another example is Sea Limited. Is not on the list. It didn't build gaming engines or e-commerce platforms. It adapted Chinese and Western models for Southeast Asia. Now it's a regional champion across gaming, e-commerce, fintech. The strategy is not just theoretically sound. It has been applied successfully in Grab and Singapore Airlines. They are the proof of concept. The same strategy works for AI. Use American or Chinese foundational models, build billion-dollar applications for our markets based on our own local knowledge. Let me give some examples of opportunities in various sectors, because AI cuts across all the different sectors. In healthcare, we can use AI to develop drugs for tropical diseases that we understand better. Develop online healthcare services for the underserved population. And I saw, I think, a video, documentary on this recently on CNA about India doing this. So it's already started. I mean, it's not new. Use AI vision model to conduct TB and malaria diagnostics. Use AI for malaria diagnosis and drug development. In agriculture, you can use AI to analyze data for disease control and yield optimization, or to improve aquaculture management. And in languages and finance, we can develop local language, large language model, LLMs, co-pilots for banks and legal firms. Use AI to analyze alternative data and perform credit scoring for the unbanked populations, and there are hundreds of millions of them. And use AI to perform micro-lending risk assessment. For government and tourism, I think we are also already started on this. Develop multilingual citizen service chatbots to improve efficiency and improve services to the people. And in tourism, develop AI travel assistance. Some of these applications may develop into billion-dollar business opportunities. We use the frontier models from the US and China as tools. Apply them to solve local problems and issues that we understand better than anyone. Leverage our data, our language, our markets, our users. China's green tech dominance. AI is one systemic transformational force. Green tech is the other. China has spent years, since the 1990s, developing batteries, EVs, solar panels, and wind turbines. And they have achieved dominance in terms of technology, quality, and cost in all of them. Many countries see this as a threat, especially the US. They worry that China will become the monopoly supplier and they will become too dependent on China. But for us, I would argue that China's green dominance shouldn't be considered a threat, but an opportunity if we play it right. The question for ASEAN: how do we turn this green tech dominance of China into opportunity? As I mentioned earlier, China has spent years developing the green industries, and they have achieved dominance in all of them. Green energy contribution to China's economy in 2024, $1.9 trillion US dollar, or 13.6 trillion yen, or 10% of GDP. But they contribute 26% to GDP growth, or about 1.5 percentage point. So here's a critical number. Without green energy, China would have missed its 5% growth target. Growth would have been only 3.5 instead of 5. Green energy isn't peripheral to China's economy. It is China's economy now. The green energy industries, EV, batteries, solar panels, and wind turbines, they grow at 3 times faster than the overall Chinese economy. This explains why China will continue to dominate in these industries. It is no longer just industrial policies. These green industries have become the backbone of the economy. The importance of green industries to China is shown in last year's economic performance. When China exports to the US collapsed by 33%, the traditional narrative was China was hit hard by the tariff. Yes, that's true. But China also pivoted. Chinese EV export to ASEAN went up by 75%. Chinese EV export to Africa up by 287%, or almost triple. Total exports to Europe up 10%. And green tech exports in August alone is 20 billion. So total Chinese export, they're up by 5.5%. So it's not just trade diversion, it's a structural shift in export products and markets. Why was China able to offset the sharp fall in export to the US? Global demand for green energy is surging due to climate change commitments under the Paris Accord. Chinese products are dramatically cheaper. 80% price drop in solar panels and wind turbines. Massive improvement in quality. Chinese EVs now compete with Tesla and European brands. Emerging markets couldn't resist the offer. Cheap transport, cheap power. The world needs the green tech products that China is selling at bargain price, and you can't tariff your way out of that. This chart captures the pivot in China's exports beautifully. China's export to the US collapsed by 33%, that's the orange line. But China's total export grew 5.5%. Redirection to ASEAN, Africa, Europe, more than offset the losses. This is China's resilience and ASEAN's opportunity. Economists like to talk about the China shock, the impact of Chinese manufacturing on Western economies. We are now experiencing the second China shock, but it's fundamentally different from the first one. The first one basically was triggered by China's entry into WTO in 2001. And the products affected then were textile, toys, electronics, appliances, and consumer goods. And the impact, it hollowed out the labor-intensive manufacturing in US, Europe. But there, and then, you can respond to that. You impose tariff and anti-dumping measures to protect the local industries. And it worked for short term, but not effective in the long term because it cannot go against market forces of comparative advantage. The second shock, triggered by the green transition plus industrial policy and R&D. And these products are EVs, batteries, solar panel, drones, robotics, the high-tech stuff. And the impact this time is going to be much lighter because few countries have green manufacturing to hollow out. They need the green manufacturing product in order to meet the climate change target. So here's the crucial difference. The first shock, you can resist by using tariff to protect your existing industry. The second shock, you can resist, not without undermining your climate goals. And the climate imperative is greater than industrial policy. The world needs cheap green energy for the 2030-2050 decarbonization targets. This is China's strategic advantage. They are positioned at the intersection of two megatrends. As I mentioned earlier, the question for most countries is, how do we turn this new shock from China into opportunities? We do this by positioning ourselves strategically in the green tech supply chain and converting imports into production. We are already seeing this strategy at work. Indonesia leveraged its nickel resources and banned raw exports of the ore. And it has forced a strategic bargain. If you want Indonesian nickel, you have to process it here in Indonesia. And the result, they attracted Chinese FDIs to Indonesia in Sulawesi, as you know. BYD, Wuling are building factories locally to produce batteries and EVs. They've created tens of thousands of jobs, and they're building an industrial ecosystem. They have a new export product, and it's given a big boost to export earnings. I think nickel export went from 1 billion to like 12 billion. Vietnam, another example, positioned itself as the ultimate China +1 destination. The assembly industry produced battery packs, EVs, consumer electronics for exports. So the lesson is clear. The value creation does not require full IP ownership. It requires strategic integration into the global value chains. Vietnam assembles iPhones and smartphones without designing chips. Similarly, ASEAN can assemble EVs without inventing batteries. The main thing is to participate strategically in the global supply chain. Don't compete on core technology that you cannot win. Position yourself in a segment of the global supply chain where you have a competitive advantage. ASEAN's strategic choices. We have analyzed the shocks. Trump tariff, disruptive but noise, now legally confirmed as overreach. AI and green tech, transformational forces that no tariff can stop. But what does this mean for ASEAN? I want to argue we have more agency than we might think. First, let me summarize the evidence the market is bigger than Trump. 6 mechanisms neutralize his tariff attack. Taco pattern. Markets learn his behavior and game it. Front loading. Massive export surge in second quarter during the pause. Indonesia export went up by 33% in June. Inventory buffers built up 2-3 quarters of cushion. Tariff absorption prevented inflation from spiking and avoided Fed tightening. Monetary easing. The low inflation enabled for central bank to cut rates in the US and in ASEAN. And China +1 reconfiguration. Exports were diverted through Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia. So why did the Trump tariff fail to work as expected? Markets were smart. They learned its behavior quickly and game it. It's reversible. Everyone knew it couldn't last. And Trump was isolated. He has no allies, no institutional support. And now the Supreme Court has put the last nail on the coffin by declaring EPA tariff illegal. The result, minimal GDP impact despite maximum political noise. So what are the strategic imperatives for ASEAN? First, AI application. Primary focus, invest in AI applications to improve productivity and services in all sectors of the economy. It should be embedded in the economy. Use American and Chinese core AI models as tools. Don't waste resources on frontier models. That's the US and China's game. Invest in downstream applications. They cost about 5-10 billion over 3 to 5 years and affordable. The success metrics, we should build up billion-dollar grab-scale AI companies. Second, on green tech, FDI. Participate strategically in the global supply chain based on comparative advantage. Accept Chinese dominance in core green tech. Leverage natural resources, nickel, lithium, rare earth. Attract FDI for manufacturing and assembly of batteries, EVs, solar panels, wind turbines. And countries in the region like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia are already doing that. Third, regional integration. So ASEAN has 680 billion population, $3.8 trillion economy, a rapidly expanding middle class. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, so there's leverage there. We have economy of scale. We have better negotiating position with US, China, and EU. So we should continue to liberalize and integrate economies to achieve a common economic union. So this is my last slide. In 2025, the market proved that it is bigger than Trump. In 2026, the Supreme Court agreed and struck down the tariff under EPA. But 3 questions remain for ASEAN. 1, can we develop the billion-dollar downstream AI applications like GrabDate with ride sharing? We don't need to build the foundation models, we need to build on top of them. 2, can we turn China's green tech dominance into FDIs like Indonesia did with nickel processing, batteries, and EVs? We don't need to build our own battery. We need to attract the factories to produce them. 3, Can we unite to amplify our strengths? 680 billion people, $3.8 trillion economy, a rapidly growing middle class, that matters. The challenges are real, and so are the pathways forward. We have agency, we have proven models. The question is whether we will seize the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khor. The question is now how you try to challenge Dr. Khor's presentation, and or you can reinforce it with your own practical experiences. Yeah, the floor is over to you. You can ask questions, make comments, but let's do it one at a time. Yeah, and please tell us who you are so that we can know how to tackle you in our response. I don't want to fight a guy who has so much knowledge, much more knowledge on our table here. Okay, Big. Hold on, Big. Let's the microphone come.
Hi, my name is Big Chen. I'm a research fellow at RSIS. So during your presentation, you mentioned Vietnam as China Plus One model. And I wonder whether, at AMRO and your current research, whether is any kind of update information about whether Vietnam actually can absorb that much of, of the transfer from China in terms of manufacturing. Because my impression is that Vietnam doesn't have enough, skilled workers to absorb those, many new factories. So do you have any kind of new report or update on that? Thank you.
Your question is whether Vietnam can absorb.
Like Vietnam has the ability, like capacity to kind of have enough skilled workers to offer for those new factories that relocate from China to Vietnam.
Well, if you call all the Vietnamese home, surely you can compete with the Chinese. Yeah, number one, you speak better English than most Chinese. Number two, you have the discipline. Yeah, but let's hear what Dr. Khor has to say. She's basically asking you. She's one of our RSIS scholars, academic researcher, or whatever you like to call yourself, Big. But she's with us. But her question is, how do we see Vietnam being able to respond to this kind of opportunity and rise to the occasion, be the good alternative for some of the action that you see happening in reshaping of the regional and global economy?
Well, Vietnam probably has the highest growth rate in the world last year, 7%, or close to being at the top. I noticed Vietnam has been very ambitious. It's always been trying to cross the 7%, and last year it did. But, I think, no, not Thailand, Vietnam, sorry. Huh? You're talking about Vietnam, right? Yeah. Yeah. I think Vietnam has always complained that it is at the lower end of the value chain, that, the Samsung, the Chinese factories, they come to take advantage of the cheap labor in Vietnam, but then they don't use local inputs or local. I think some of these products, especially in the electronics, the intermediate input has to be very high quality, and the thing is, it takes time for Vietnam companies to reach that level. So until then, I think the Samsung, they continue to import the intermediate products from Korea, but they assemble the products in Vietnam. But it's making progress, slowly. I think we see the same problem, same thing in Penang, the electronic factories, Texas Instruments. But that we have seen progress over the years. Intel has been there since the 1970s, so it's 50 years. We still don't produce the high-end fabrication and all that. But if you go to Penang now, they have now moved up the value chain to do designing of I guess those semiconductor product which are targeted specifically. Again, it's an application side, not at the foundational side, where you have to compete with TSMC, which is impossible. So I think it's a matter of perspective. To the rest of the world, Vietnam is very successful. It tried a lot of FDI last year, and the point is, it's not just diversion of trade. You are getting the factories to move to Vietnam to produce the product. If it's just diversion of trade, then there's very little value added at all. And that I don't think will pass the test of the U.S. tariff anyway. But so it takes time for, I guess, Vietnam to build up, its competence in some of these areas over time. But I know the Vietnamese are very ambitious people, very smart people, and over time they're going to get there.
So wait, just now you say Vietnam grew by 7%. Is it 7% or what? 7%, huh? So Vietnam grew by 7%. So it's a big number.
It's a big number,
exactly.
But
for ASEAN economic growth.
Happy.
Yeah, they're not happy because they have millions of people. Yeah, so it's quite a challenge to find what we call satisfactory job to the young Vietnamese.
Yeah. No, there was a time in the, I think, maybe 10, 20 years ago, Vietnam always tried to, keep up with China in terms of the growth rate. But so China was doing 10% a year, right? 9-10% a year. And Vietnam, why can't we do the same? But every time you go beyond the 6-7%, you have a balance of payment problem. Your current account deficit gets too large, and then you get. But they have crossed that threshold now. They're at the point where I think the foreign reserve that they have built up is sufficient to support them. Now they have 120 billion, I think, over $100 billion of reserve. And so I think they are in a much stronger position now to grow at that rate than before. I think the market is very punishing. If you don't behave, you don't have sufficient reserve, you have too large a fiscal deficit, you have too large a current account deficit, then they hammer you, and you get this capital outflow.
On Vietnam, one of the concerns that I picked up at the ASEAN discussion is the future of development in the Mekong River area, because water is important, and the downflow from China in terms of the water to the Mekong River and to the sea is declining. So electrification project, as well as rice growing in the Mekong Delta region will be affected. Because if you look at the Mekong Delta, the amount of silk and other valuable from the mountains in the north flowing down with the water is very substantial.
Yes.
Yeah. So the concern in Vietnam and also Laos is the future of the traditional source of strength for the Vietnamese economy, namely the river. How do you see that? Is there an effort on the part of Vietnam and the neighboring countries of the Mekong River to try to increase certain cooperation with China to share the bounty from the river?
Yeah, I know that's a cross-border problem for many countries, not just Vietnam. I think Cambodia also has an issue with that, because I think the Mekong River become flattened off after, and so the hydro dam, doesn't unable to produce the kind of electricity that it needs. But I think electricity is only one part of the equation, and they need to talk to China and the other countries to try to resolve this water issue. But the economy is diversifying very rapidly, into manufacturing and so I think eventually technology will be able to help solve some of these problems. Like the cost of salinization, right? Desalination, that has come down drastically, right, from the time when we started here in Singapore. So that's the extreme measure that you may have to take. But this issue of the water river flow, how strong it is, I don't know how much of it is caused by China building the dam at the upper end of the river, because the flow of the water shouldn't be affected that much. But, it has been, and it's not clear whether it's because of the dam built on upper reaches or whether it's because, because of the weather change and, you're getting less rainfall and all that over time.
Well, from my ASEAN experiences, the Cambodians are saying that this famous lake in Cambodia called Tong Li Sap is no longer producing the traditional fish, the eel-like fish that you see from the lake. And this, to some people in Cambodia, is a cultural shock because for generations, they rely on this fish for their diet and other kind of festival. So, yeah, this is something that I think the ASEAN countries on the Mekong Basin arena have to sit down and talk to China, as well as the flow coming into South China Sea also can be quite an issue for the South China Sea contestation. If you look at the map of Vietnam around south of Ho Chi Minh City, you will see that there is like a hook, the curve, the land, is because, according to various research, every year the land size of that area grow by 50 meters as a result of the amount of silt and other things brought down by the Mekong River as the river hit the South China Sea. So it is a natural reclamation of the sea by the earth and other kind of rubbish you get from the Mekong River flowing down all the way from Tibet. And according to research, in recent years, that has not been the kind of pattern. So Vietnamese cannot gain as much new land as they wish from the flow of the Mekong River. This is one thing that requires a lot of studies. So those of us in RSIS who wish to look into some of these issues will be quite interesting, and Vietnamese scholars have been studying this quite extensively. Yeah, although we don't get to see them in the public media, the mass media. Okay. Next question, yes, at the back, the last guy there. Where are you from? I can't see you. Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, my name is Brian Yo. I was a former graduate from RSIS. I currently do consulting for central banks, including on AI. Dr. Khor, you had mentioned that there's a distributional impacts of AI split between knowledge and physical work. I'd like to ask your views on what happens in a few years' time if indeed AI becomes sufficiently good at knowledge work, sufficiently good at knowledge work to be on par with an average graduate in terms of doing things such as research or various other types of activities. At that point, is there also going to be a significant distributional impact on age, so experienced workers versus young workers, as well as on countries, especially those that have focused on perhaps lower down the value chain knowledge work, such as software development, call centers, etc. And if so, does this imply that there will be the benefits of AI will end up accruing to either the more experienced or the richer jurisdictions? Thanks.
Impact of AI. How does it work on the future of human resource mobilization? I guess that was he's driving at. Yeah. Even now today, some people tell me with AI, they don't have to employ too many people. So if our employment calculation and employment projection is based on people coming out from school, the graduate from university and all that, what kind of impact on the labor market, the future employment prospects, and all these have a bigger impact on society as a whole. Am I correct? Around those lines, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the big billion-dollar question again. The disruption in the labor market. I don't know if any of you saw the Citrini report. It came out a day or two ago, and it caused the market to sell off. Because I think the report warned that the improvement in productivity is going to be so great compared to, and there'll be a massive retrenchment of labor, and then the economy is unable to absorb the labor, so you have a negative loop form because the labor then don't have the income, they won't be able to spend, the demand will go down, and then it's so that's a real risk. I think we really, economies are really not equipped yet to answer that kind of question. This is I think a challenge to the traditional paradigm that we use to analyze the economy. The marginal labor, wage equals marginal labor, because we always assume that there is a supply constraint, right? But when you have AI, and if it's really so productive that you need 1/10 of the workers that you had before, you can imagine the amount of labor out there that's looking for a job, right? So again, but here I think there was a bit of this concern before. I mean, if the higher productivity is reflected in higher profits of the company, right? And they can be taxed by the government and redistributed to maybe provide adjustment for the workers, help the workers to adjust and then it's one thing. But if the productivity increase is absorbed in terms of I mean, just like internet, zero marginal cost, you cannot raise the price because your competitor is there, And then it's going to be a big problem, okay? In which case, then you have massive increase in productivity, but there's no demand on the other side, So it is an issue, and I think we are just starting on that disruption, and which I think Singapore is very proactive in terms of setting up this AI commission under the PM to try to see how to deal with the disruption of AI. So there is an AI transition problem, just like the green transition, right? And I think we are all going to learn what how big the disruption is, how we're going to manage it over the coming years. I still think the service sector is like a sponge and is able to create new needs, new wants, and new demands. Just like influencer, gaming, or they never existed in the past, but now they are part of the job market, and the gig economy is going to grow as well. But unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, we are all trying to figure out what is going to happen.
All like you say is the application of AI. So to a larger extent, as we absorb more of the value of AI and its usefulness, we must also think of how do we deal with the old world assets. The old world assets include human resources. How do we deploy them? Yeah. Do we have to always think of creating a job for all the graduates? In the first place, maybe we don't need so many graduates. You want to reply? Go ahead.
Sorry, I would like
do
to
a
take
3-day week instead of 5.
Come.
Sorry, I would like to take a point on this, which is that I think I agree with you that redistribution will be important. The challenge is, though, that the distributional impact of productivity will be significant. If, for example, you only have high value, while there are several new jobs that will be created, it is not clear at this point whether or not those new jobs will be anywhere near the same level of value add as the jobs that are being displaced. An influencer does make money, but the tail of distribution for influencer income is very different to the tail of distribution for accountants, for example. So, but thank you for
Yeah, I
the need for
think
redistribution.
I think maybe you can say something about what is envisaged as every society, including Singapore, go forward with AI. And this idea that PM Lawrence Wong announced looking at what AI will do for us and how we can counter the negatives in the AI adoption is important, right? So it also include the kind of issues that you have in mind. The question, it cannot be business as usual. Yeah. So this look at the bigger consequences of AI include the concern about how to get jobs, how to make sure that all those old jobs that have been displaced by the new machine and technology doesn't mean the end of the workers' economic span. The worker have to move to other things. Yeah. So it is a big.
I think that another disruption that will come is the combination of AI with robotics, humanoids, right? When that happens, they can do a lot of the manual work as well. So that has always been, employer of last resort for many of the poor countries, So if you now use humanoids and you don't use cheap labor, then what happened to the cheap labor? I think, these are very massive issues that's going to show up. And, hopefully we have a smooth transition, but I think government needs to play a bigger role, that's my sense, because, in the US, what is happening is that you have this growing disparity between the rich and poor. The billionaires, you have that, Elon Musk is going to be a trillionaire, right, in another few years. And then in the meantime, huge disparity with the lower population. But Asia is also aging, right? So I think some of these shortages can be filled by, AI and robotics and all that. But I think even so, it's not going to be sufficient to, overcome the disruption.
There will be some adjustment, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Last night I watched this movie, documentary on TV, How I Date an AI. Yeah. You can go back to your own TV set at home and try to recall that from Channel News Asia. Yeah. One of the proposals is to have this kind of AI invention to reduce the mental stress of lonely retiree or widow or widower. Yeah. So I was looking at my wife to, see her reaction, and she said, "Don't say anything, I know what is coming from you." Yeah. So, but the thing is that the AI lady on the handphone inquire about the man's, whether he had eaten his dinner and how are you today and all that kind of thing. I don't know what is going to happen, man. Maybe like the case of the Japanese woman marrying the man in Japan through the AI. Yeah. So things will change. Social upheaval will come, and I guess here in Singapore, being a small island, we might be able to tackle some of these things more quickly, more directly, hopefully more peacefully, with not too much upheaval on all our existing way of life. Okay, enough of this subject. What other question?
I think there was another.
Yes, over there. The man in blue, yeah.
Hi, Amir from RSIS. My first question is relates to your descriptions of Trump tariff as noise. I wonder if it appreciates the systemic changes resultant of that tariff itself. For example, the value, the recent analysis suggests the decline of US dollar value as a result of that, which is a more systemic change in general. And also with regards to green technology and describing Indonesia as a success, I was also wondering with regards to US sanctions and the opposing force of that, right? And whether you are suggesting that the China dominance in that green tech sector is so big that it would outweigh the opposing pressures for ASEAN countries to kind of de-risk from China and therefore pivot from that strategy. Thank you.
Second part first. Can all these Chinese advancement in AI development and all that, in green technology and all that, will basically have a more severe impact on our own ASEAN region going forward? Yeah. In terms of jobs, in terms of our ASEAN GDP, in terms of our ASEAN products or what have you.
Yeah, I think the second shock, the China second shock, right, is a concern, right, for many countries, because now the Chinese have become so competitive, not just in the high-tech area, but even the low-tech area, garments, for instance. Although recently, I mean, the reports about in Indonesia, they have to lay off hundreds of, thousands of workers and all that. I don't know to what extent that's because of diversion of trade, because of tariff, or whether it's because of competitiveness. But in any case, I think, these are market forces at work, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to set up a tariff to protect your indigenous worker? That's not going to be last, because market forces will eventually get around the tariff, and you won't be able to build up a competitive industry that way. So that's why I mentioned that the way to overcome some of this problem is to invite Chinese FDI to come to, because in the end of the day, the supply needs the demand. Where's the demand going to come from? The demand is in the region. The region, we are 680 billion people. We have a $3.5 trillion economy. So we have to find where in the value chain we can compete, competitive, and then we focus on that and try to produce in that segment of the value chain. And I'm sure even though Chinese have dominance in the green tech, they also want to export the product, and many of them, for instance, the Chinese EV company, they are coming to the region because they cannot compete at home. The competition at home is even more fierce than outside the country, right? So so I'm sure market forces eventually will sort of help to reallocate some of these things. But what I'm saying is, if you want to compete with them at the foundation level in terms of building the technology, and we don't need to, because that's very costly. It doesn't create a lot of jobs, and and it takes a lot of talent away from the.
Mirza, my father used to ask me how the fridge work, refrigerator. I said, Father, why do you need to know how the fridge work? You are not a scientist, you don't have to repair the fridge. Just remember that you buy fresh food, put in the fridge, 1 week later it can still be eaten. It's not dead. So I think the same thing with green tech. What is important, Mirza is one of our colleagues, he comes from Indonesia originally. What is important is how to mobilize the Indonesian population to see the good thing about AI. Yeah, and then if I'm a Chinese investor, I will also be very sensitive about how to invest my money in ASEAN, in particular in Indonesia, because you have so many millions of workers. Yeah. So what Dr. Khor is trying to stress is applications of AI. It doesn't mean at the end there. Somewhere in the middle also, you got to think about how to mobilize your domestic assets such as manpower and policy making. If I may say so, Hoe, I think one of the things that we need to think about, if you can add to your wonderful presentation, is how do we look at ASEAN human resource development and applying that kind of advantage to deal with the AI challenge, because at the end of the day, yes, AI may reduce workforce, may bring down the number of jobs for physical human beings. But at the same time, it is also an opportunity to divert some of these spare bodies, so to speak, to new areas. For example, Indonesia, you have such a huge archipelago. Yeah, we have to decide. One of the things that somebody asked me from Indonesia is, what you think Indonesia should do? I say, you should not do EV. You should do e-sampan, e-boat. Because in your archipelago, from one island to another, it's a straight line traveling on the water. So you have an e-boat or e-sampan. Number one, overall only they say, I'm not going to sail because there are too many people. So no chance of the EV or e-boat sinking into the sea or due to overloading. So things like that. I think the lecture has directed us to think about how do we do things traditionally, how do we now look at our own respective developments, what are the wonderful respective advantages we have in each ASEAN member country, and then maybe do that first and then see how we can get other ASEAN member states to join in as a group. Yeah. So
That will be the agenda for ASEAN next year.
yeah, that would be us. Yeah. This year, the chairmanship of ASEAN is Philippines. Next year is Singapore. My wife actually say, your prime minister. I say, hold on, he is also your own prime minister. No, not my prime minister. Yeah, but she is saying that he talks about how to deal with AI. The most important thing is how do we get the rest of ASEAN country around Singapore to also be on the same boat. Work on AI and make the best, because Singapore may now have all the advantages that Indonesia has or Malaysia has. Yeah, so this is something that we need to think about. But you have something to add to what Amir Zah had to say, no?
Not really, I think.
Okay, Amir Zah, you can talk to Dr. Khor back in our school. Yeah, maybe you spend 1 hour with him. Get an appointment. Whether you get 1 hour or not, I do not know. But okay, next question. Comments. Yes, sir. Over here, man in black. Where are you from, sir? Can't see you.
Hello.
Yeah.
You mentioned Southeast Asia, we may benefit from low inflation. My question is, if all over the world there are money printing, especially USA, Japan as well, and tariff and everything, USA may face some inflationary pressure and interest rate long ends be higher for longer. If Asia is lower rates, but over there in the US it's higher rates, what would happen in consequence, please? Like, would the US rates go down following Asia, or which way?
You mean the rates of what?
The
Interest rate?
For example, 10-year US Treasury or US government band long year mortgage rates, or
So bond rates.
these kind of things that make stock market under pressure and bond market under pressure and economy, hyperscale investment, be difficult and all that. I wonder if that kind of thing can happen or not.
Yeah, these are market forces at work, and as I said, we were very wrong, in our projection and forecast last year, and that's because we are, there are so new forces at work now, right? AI, especially in the case of the US, right? And also geopolitical, conflict. But what is remarkable is that I think in the past, whenever there's a rise in risk aversion, some problem somewhere in the world, you find that most of the emerging markets economy were under pressure because money would leave back and go to the US. That has changed. Okay? That's no longer the case. And so for the first time last year, even though the US interest rate was relatively high, right? And the economy is still doing well, the currency weakened, right? It weakened against the regional currency. The ringgit now is 3.9. It was 4.5 just not so long ago. So actually that provide a lot of space for the central bank in the region to ease policy to support their economy. So, I mean, your question is, I think, there's many things happening at the same time, and it's difficult to isolate one factor from the other, right? It's true that inflation, in the US is higher, right? It's 2.5%, but we were expecting it to be 3, and if it's at 3, of course, interest rates have gone up, and then there'll be more outflow from the rest of the world to the US, probably because of the high interest rate. But because there's so many forces at work, it's very difficult to look ahead and say whether the US is going to weaken or strengthen against the regional currency. But we know that actually, in terms of the macro fundamentals, the region is doing very well, because the inflation here is low, the growth rate is holding up well, right? And we have a very strong inflow of FDI into the region at the moment, which is supporting growth. Whereas in the case of the US, the problem now is they have a very large fiscal deficit, almost 7% of GDP. That's huge, okay? And a lot of economies worried about, the debt stock in the U.S., how they're going to finance it. If they're going to have to borrow and revenue doesn't come in, interest rate will go even higher in order to finance it, right? And so on the one hand, that sucks in the money from outside, but at the same time, because of the geopolitics, the US dollar is under pressure, and so interest rate will go even higher in order to keep those money within the economy. So there's a tension there between the large fiscal deficit that they have and the credibility of the US dollar at the moment, because the US has weaponized the US dollar, and countries like China and they are moving out from US dollar into gold.
So, Hoe, we're talking about American and USA all the time. What about Europe and India? Do they have any impact on all these things that's happening? Or we don't have to worry about them anymore?
Europe was a bit of it benefited from the move out of US dollar, because besides the euro, where do you go if you want to diversify your asset, right? So Europe, I think, benefited from that. That's why the euro exchange rate is now 1.18, right? It was 1.05, not so long ago, right? So, but they gained by default, not because the economy is very strong, but because people are getting out of US dollar into other assets. But now the economy is beginning to turn around. They were hit very badly because of the Ukraine war, right? Energy prices went through the roof and all that. But now the economy is stabilized and beginning to turn around. So, and also they're beginning to see that this is a new world order, as Mark Carney said, and they're going to have to do it alone. So they're going to build up their defense capability. The market sees opportunity in in new areas. So there's going to be a reconfiguration of the global economy. Yeah.
I'm told that the time is almost up. So is there any last question or comments? Anybody? We can still give 2-3 minutes to address your question. Or okay, yes. Fu Kwang, is it? Fu Kwang? Yeah, the microphone is coming.
Thank you. My question relates to something you said at your presentation, Dr. Khor, that we are in a new economic paradigm with this transformational technology like AI, and economists don't have all the answers in this new situation. So my question is, you are an economist, so I think you're the best person to. Can you elaborate on that? What exactly is this new economic paradigm that we are in, and what traditional economic principles are being threatened by this new situation that we are in, which may no longer apply? Thank you.
I guess what I'm referring to is the scale of the disruption by AI, right? Traditionally, you have a steady state, the economy grows, you have increase in labor supply, you have increase in labor and all that. But now you have a disruption where the demand for labor is going to drop very sharply, right? And so then the question is, what other activities are there to be able to absorb that labor supply? And if you don't, then it creates an imbalance in the macroeconomy, right? How do you rebalance the economy? You're going to have large number of unemployed people out there. You're going to have social unrest. It's a political problem. So how, in the traditional economic paradigm, right, we always assume that, at the margin, new activities will be created, and they'll absorb and even if there's an excess supply, we don't, it's, at the margin, it's not huge, right? But now we have a situation where, it's quite a sharp difference between. So that's the challenge for economies, because when you have that kind of supply imbalance, it's very hard to see how your traditional marginal cost and benefit comes in, because these are not marginal, these are large quantum changes.
Well, that means you're going to have a lot of unemployment, a lot of
Could, yeah, I mean,
restless population.
and that's the fear. But
Yeah, so for the RSIS graduate, sure got job one, because you can help the government analyze problem. Well, that's quite a bad scenario though.
yeah, but you know, okay, but during the pandemic, right? Actually, that's another experiment. You basically shut down the economy. There was no demand, right, and no supply, and we have to keep people alive. But we managed to ride through that shock. Right? But that was a temporary shock. Now, if it's a permanent shock, you cannot continue to pump out money for people to keep them a living. So that's the challenge I think we have, because this is a structural permanent shock, not your pandemic shock, which is temporary.
Okay, any more? I think you have given us some food for thought for this afternoon. Maybe I give a chance for this lady to ask a question or comment. Yes, madam, wait, the microphone is coming.
I'm just coming from all that. Is it what China is facing now? Unemployment of a lot of the youth, in spite of the fact that they are so advanced in the green technology and AI compared to the rest of us. That's just a comment, I think.
Oh, the unemployment problem in China of the youth you're talking about, right? Yeah, the lying flat. No, I think unemployment of the youth is a problem not just in China, everywhere. You know, it's becoming a big problem everywhere. But you're right that there is. But if you look at unemployment statistics, right, it is holding up at 5.1, 5.2, right? So maybe these are not captured in the data, right? And so many of these youth who are unemployed, they are looking for, they're in a gig economy doing things, influence, Grab driver, delivery, and some of them just decide to just take time off. So we don't really know, but I don't think the scale of the problem in China is as big as in some of the other countries. And this is, in China, because now the population is shrinking, right? I think, in a way, that helps to reduce the pressure, because the new jobs that are created, there are less people anyway, right, to create new jobs. And also the economy has not fully returned back to equilibrium. As you know, the real estate sector is still very weak in the doldrum, and so when that picks up, I think there's going to be a very strong demand pool, because a lot of people are not spending. When the housing property market is down, there's no need to buy new appliances. There's no need for all the household products, furnitures, and all that. So I think there is still a gap there, which can be filled when the real estate sector finally recovered. Yeah.
One thing about the increased joblessness in China, maybe they don't classify it as unemployment per se, because some of these individuals who have no formal job now will help their uncle, auntie in other kind of activities that earn them a meal a day or go to a shop somewhere. Yeah, this is the situation in Iran, for example. Yeah, I work for our government in Iran in some places. Yeah, and almost every man you meet out of 3 guys have no job. But every morning they say goodbye to their family, carry their briefcase, go out to join their uncle's shop, hang around one corner shop that fix your handphone. Usually 3 employees, now you have about 10 of them. All the nephews and so on will all be there. And all they get is a lunch meal free, yeah, and then maybe a few bucks to commute from their home to the shop or from the shop back home. So it's called underemployment. I suspect in China there is a lot of underemployment, yeah, but because they are not like what you have in Western country queuing up for unemployment benefit, therefore the number doesn't come out so starkly to you or to the government policy people to frighten them. If they are in Europe or in America, then that is definitely 2-3% increase in unemployment. Yeah. So this is something that is good in China in the sense that the system, the way things are done, help to minimize the dramatic impact of what we consider normal economic statistics. Yeah. Similarly, in Iran, they don't consider themselves as having 19% unemployment or 20% unemployment because they say this guy still go to the shop and he get a lunch meal and then he have money to go home to his home and then come back the next morning. So they don't consider it unemployment. But in economic terms, it's underemployment. Okay, those of you who have more questions can ask Hoe as he step out. Yeah, and then thank you all for coming. I hope we can pursue this topic in another more detailed manner, relying on this man called Khor Hoe. He's an economist by training. Maybe he can tell us more. Maybe every 3 months or so we should get a review from him. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Have a good day.